everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has that one story at least.
The narration is so simple and so beautiful that apart from a work of history, you will find it to be like a novel.
It is often said that tragedies make for the best stories, right? And I don't think there's any bigger tragedy in the history of independent India than the tragedy of Bihar.
Namaste everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to this insightful discussion on Broken Promises of Bihar, a book that delves into the political, social and economic realities of one of the India's most historically rich yet developmentally challenged state. It is an honor to have with us today Mrityunjay Sharma ji, the author of Broken Promises of Bihar, who brings with him a wealth of experience in governance, policy, and grassroots development. An engineering graduate from BIT Mesra and an MBA from Excel Erai Jamshedpur, Mrityunjay ji has had an illustrious corporate career before dedicating himself to public service and electoral management in Jharkhand. His work through initiatives like Kartavya Path and Biofy.com showcases his deep commitment to education and social development. To formally commence today's program, we will begin with the facilitation of our esteemed author by Professor Aditya Trivedi ji, Program Director at Rishihood Foundation Program and BTech. Thank you, Aditya sir. Now, I would like to invite moderator for the today's session, Nilab Sharma ji, research associate at Center for Human Sciences, who will guide today's engaging conversation. I am certain that this discussion will provide us with valuable insights into Bihar, developmental trajectory, and the larger political landscape. Thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to an enriching exchange of ideas. With that, let us begin.
Okay, so thank you very much, Pranay, for giving me this opportunity to finally meet you, sir. I've been looking forward to it for so long, apart from the facts that have been mentioned. And I would like to correct Pranay on the title that you mentioned. It's Broken Promises, Caste, Crime and Politics in Bihar. So the three key words, caste, crime and politics, were missing. But nevertheless, uh, the content, apart from the content, which carries more than 280 references within it, the narration is so simple and so beautiful that you will, apart from a work of history, you will find it to be like a novel. It's so interesting a narration. So thank you very much, sir, for putting it so simply. And I would just begin with a very cliched question, which I think many people have already asked you, as to what motivated you to write this book. I think this is your first book. So what motivated you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for everybody who's been a part of arranging this. Thank you to Alok, who's been, very kind enough to, he's been coordinating and trying to put this to shape that it has come to now. The question, to answer the question, there are two levels of it. One is a philosophical level, wherein you say that, and then a lot of authors and philosophers say this, that everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has that one story at least that they want to tell. Maybe this was my story. Second, I read a lot. So I read on topics that interest me, mostly non-fiction, mostly, and these days I read because I'm in politics, so I read a lot of, politics, sociopolitics, socioeconomics, and so on, history, and so on. But this is something, I come from that state, the undivided Bihar, so as to say, I come from Ranchi. And when I wanted to read on this subject, when I wanted to read on what Bihar had gone through, and I wanted to understand it, and how could possibly a state go through such an era of misgovernance, and not just misgovernance, misgovernance is a very, very small word, such an era of, I would say, catastrophe. When I wanted to read on it, I did not get anything to read on it, to be honest. Apart from, let's say, very disconnected articles in newspapers or very disconnected kind of blogs or so on. There was not one book which would describe what happened and why did it happen, what was the implications, the deeper analysis of it. And this is not an era which is too far in the history. This is not, we're not talking about something in 1200s and 1300s that, okay, it has been missed by mistake. Not at all. It is just 15, 20 years ago. Something we have seen right in front of our eyes, right? And yet nobody has written on it. So it was very, striking to me. It was very surprising to me as to why hasn't anybody written on it. And then when it is such an interesting topic as well, right? So it is often said that tragedies make for the best stories, right? And this, I don't think there's any bigger tragedy in the history of independent India than the tragedy of Bihar. So, and I often, I go to a lot of these podcasts and, book talks, and I often compare it to the tragedy in Kashmir, right? So there's some very striking resemblances to Bihar and Kashmir, right? The tragedies in both these states, broadly you would say, started in the same time, 1990, right? In Kashmir as well, in Bihar as well. Kashmir, there was a lot of foreign interference, or let's say interference from across the border and so on, right? A lot of displacement happened, a lot of murders or killings happened, specifically of a particular religion, a particular caste, Kashmiri Brahmins. In Bihar as well, if you see, it started in the 1990s. A lot of massacres happened. Again, specifically, very specific caste-based massacres. A displacement happened, which would be like 100 times of what displacement would have happened in Kashmir. There was no foreign interference though. And this, I think, has made a lot of a difference in terms of the quantum of writing that has been there on Kashmir. If you have visited Srinagar or Jammu, and if you have visited a library there or a bookstore there, there would be hundreds of titles on Kashmir, hundreds of them. So if you are somebody who loves books, if you ever go to Kashmir, if you ever go to Srinagar, and if you ever go to the Dal Lake, right, for boating and all, there's a very beautiful bookstore that is right in the middle of Dal Lake, which is connected through a passage, right? It's a very beautiful bookstore. And there I saw there would be almost 100 or 200 titles on Kashmir, on the tragedy of Kashmir. But when you start finding on the tragedy of Bihar, you do not find even one book. And that struck me even more that, why has it been left out? And I was also sure that so many people want to read it and want to know it. So I thought then it's kind of like this responsibility that lies on me. It said that, if you can't find something to read which you want to really read on, maybe the responsibility lies on you to write it. So then I took on the responsibility that I should write it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Very beautifully answered, and you became the change you wanted to see in the world. So, yeah. So, moving on to the title of the book, which is Broken Promises. So, this question is in two parts. The first is that while I was preparing for this interview, I came across this one more book on Bihar by Vinita Damodaran. And it's also called Broken Promises, and it's based upon the history between 1935 to 1946. So, does that have to play some part in you taking this title?
No, very interestingly, in fact, I came to know of this book after I published the book. Okay. So see, what happens is a lot of scrutiny comes only after something becomes very well known, right? So very honestly, I did not know of that book. And as you said, it belongs to a completely different era. And it is more of an academic book. And I don't know. I haven't even referenced that book because I could not find it. It was so obscure. I did not find any mention of it. But then when the books started becoming slightly well known and famous, and then somebody wrote in a comment, no, this is also a book written on Bihar. So then I said maybe, but and it's very strange that among the very few books that would have been written, it bears such a striking resemblance in the title itself, which is again very strange to me as well. Yeah.
Maybe a lot of people have broken many promises that were made with reference to Bihar. So, just building upon this, what are few of the promises that you think are were very essential and promising, but were broken by these champions of politics?
So, see, Bihar is not a place which is, I would say, when we became independent, Bihar was still lagging behind some of the other parts of the nation. It was not like it was one of the front runners of development or the kind of governance that we expect. Uh, but over the years, as you see, right, it degraded even more, right? And that too, when Bihar was also the epicenter of a lot of social changes that the country saw, positive social changes, I would say. So Bihar was the first state in the country to abolish the zamindari system in the 1950s, right? Bihar was one of the first states to bring in a land ceiling act so that the land holding patterns that were there in the state, in which most of the lands were held by some zamindars or some wealthy people, and 90% of the people literally did not have lands, right? So to even that out, land ceiling acts were brought in. Bhudan movement started in Bihar by Binoba Bhaveji. He said, that laws cannot be the resolution of, you know, uh, distributing lands, because then people will resist. So it can only be voluntary, right? It is only when people want to donate that this can be done. And a lot of, land donations happened through Bhudan movement. Then it was the epicenter of the total revolution, JP movement, right? Which is the biggest, you would say, movement in the independent India, right? Uh, if for pre-independence, you can say the Quit India movement was the biggest, so as to say, movement. Post-independence, I would say JP movement. This is the biggest movement that India has seen. That, almost you can say, well, it started in some parts in Gujarat. It took its main shape in Bihar, in Patna, right? Socialism, if you see, the rise of socialism started largely in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Lohia ji came from Uttar Pradesh, Karpuri Thakur, Raj Narayan, all of these people came from Purvanchal and Bihar. So a lot of these social movements, social changes, ground movements, all of them initiated in Bihar, right? And still, it turned out to be a place which was the most, you would say, misgoverned, least inclined to development. The people faced the largest atrocities, right? And this kept on continuing continuously after independence, even after JP movement, right? Bihar did not gain anything out of that JP movement, right? Even in the 1980s, when Congress had a pretty stable government in Bihar, in 10 years it had a full majority government. Still, the Congress governments in those days used to be run by the whims and fancies of one person at the helm of affairs, right? Then it was first Indira Gandhi and then Rajiv Gandhi. So what Congress would do in most of the states in the country, if you read history, is they would keep on changing chief ministers every 2 years. Even if they have a majority, suddenly they don't like the person, they'll change them. Right? So even in Bihar, if you see, there were 6 chief ministerial changes in 10 years, even though they had a majority. Right? And by 1990s, what happened is Bihar already was lagging behind most of the parts of the country in all, let's say, development parameters, in all HDI indicators, in all social parameters. It was deeply divided along caste lines. So 1990, we are already at a very pretty bad shape. But after 1919, when there's a very beautiful quote which says, God, when I said, how bad can it get, how worse can it get, I was not challenging you. Right? So by 1990, when you thought that Bihar is already at its worst, right? How bad can it get? Then came the worst phase of Bihar, right? So 1990s turned out to be the worst that anybody had ever imagined in their dreams. not in terms of just development or bijli, sadak, pani, but in terms of the entire social structures, the entire, it came very close to becoming a failed state. There were massacres in which villages were completely wiped out. There were private caste armies. These private caste armies were so huge, they would have thousands and thousands of guns and ammunitions. They were not just very small private armies. They were Bahubalis who were not just Bahubalis in terms of, just slightly more powerful. They were Bahubalis because they used to run the entire area. They used to govern those entire areas. And even police or administration did not have any say in how those areas could be run. It was at their whims and fancies, right? So 1990s saw, and then hence I've written as broken promises because by the time 1990 came, and with the promises of what JP movement had brought in, what the rise of socialism, the rise of socialist leaders such as Lalu Prasad Yadav, Nitish Kumar, Karpuri Thakur had just died. Now these socialist leaders, if you see, they had come on the entire plank of trying to bring social justice, to say that, whatever atrocities have been done to people who are have-nots or who have been oppressed till now, will try and get justice to them, right? So the entire plank of social justice on which they rose to power, all the socialist leaders, if you see, Mulayam Singh Yadav again in the neighboring state of Uttar Pradesh. But if you see, the 1990s came to the worst because these whole, you would say, the protectors of social justice themselves became the destroyers of social peace, right? In a way. And hence, it's titled Broken Promises. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So another question I would like to ask you, sir, is that if we talk about movements or let's say protests, so there are 4 or 5 instances that come to my mind, all ending in the same fate. So the first was the independence movement itself. So when there was the movement going on, all the people were together. But when we got independence finally, we see people like Dinkarji fiercely criticizing the government and sort of having a very pessimistic view of what was expected and what the reality became. Then the next was the JP movement, starting with a students' protest, then leading to a nationwide movement. From that movement, many great leaders took birth, whom we know today: Mulayam Singh Yadav, Nitish Kumar, Lalu Prasad Yadav, all these big names, Ram Vilas Paswan. That also culminated in the same way. We had Indira Gandhi coming back to power in just no time, and you have made a very sarcastic comment here in your book that Indira Gandhi did a Morarji on Morarji, something like this. So the third time it happens is the India Against Corruption movement. And we know what happened to the leaders of that movement very recently. Fourth movement, which is a little different from all these three, which at least ended it on a positive note in this period of time, can be said to be the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, which at least didn't end up in a pessimistic note. So, what do you think is similar with the earlier three movements and different with this fourth movement?
So, is this possible to close this? Thoda, I think, will be quieter. Yeah, thank you. This is better, right? Okay. So, see, movements is a very tricky subject. Most of us, we believe, and specifically people who, if you see on the left side of the spectrum, people who have a political ideology on the left side, all they believe is in protests and movements, right? And they think a solution to everything is a certain kind of a protest or a movement. And to everything they'll say, let's have a revolution, kranti lana hai. But you also have to be very cognizant of what is that movement aimed at. So movements which are not aimed, the end goal is not very clear, I think those movements fail, right? So even if in the case of, let's say, India against corruption, or even JP movement, I would say, there was no end goal in it, right? Because, okay, you wanted to overthrow the power. You wanted to say that Indira Gandhi had become dictatorial. In the India against corruption movement, you said the Congress government had become corrupt. But what then? They were overthrown, right? Even Indira Gandhi was overthrown. The Congress government was overthrown in Delhi, in center as well. But what after that? Are you proposing a solution to it is the most important part in any revolution. If you're not proposing a solution, if you're not proposing an alternate, you're merely just, trying to secure own personal goals in being seen as somebody who's क्रांतिकारी. भगत सिंह बनना अच्छी बात है, लेकिन भगत सिंह वो देश की आजादी के लिए बन रहे थे. अगर मुझे यही नहीं पता है कि मैं भगत सिंह किस लिए बन रहा हूं, then it is a waste. It's like a rebel without a cause. And hence, most of the larger changes that you see that is brought in a society, in a country, in a nation, are very small, sustained changes. US did not become US because it had so while it had movements, it had wars and everything, internal civil wars and everything, but it did not become US because of that itself. Because of a declaration of independence, it did not become US. Because it worked upon its human resources, its mineral resources, creating some value out of it. Over 100 years, it became a democracy even before half the world knew what was democracy. And it remained in that way without any interruptions to democracy over the next 200 years. And hence it became US. China is so developed today because in the late 1970s itself, it said will become the manufacturing hub of the world. And then it followed that policy over the next 30 years, 40 years, even till now. And hence it became so developed. So most of the changes in the world, again, most of the social changes even, right, if you see, they're brought about by very, very sustained, gradual, when you involve people, when you involve all the stakeholders, when you have a very clear end goal in mind, that ways. Whenever you just try to overthrow the system because it is inefficient, you get what a Pakistan is. They always overthrow the governments because they're inefficient. And then a more inefficient government comes in. Right? So that cannot be called a Kranti in my case. And I write a lot of poetry as well. In fact, my writing started with the poetry. And in fact, that's the influence when you were saying it's the flow and everything. Because the poetry is what seeps into me even when I'm writing non-fiction. So I wrote a poem on Kranti, in fact, on what, because a lot of your, whatever you write, it is colored by your views. You cannot deny that, right? And I wrote a poem on Kranti, on what Kranti means, right? And it reads something like, I keep forgetting my own poem, so I'm sorry. It reads something like, if I can just see and recite to you. One second. Yes, so this, the poem goes like this. लोगों का हुजूम, लाल झंडे, इनकलाब के नारे, पुलिस की लाठियां और खून के फव्वारे ही महज क्रांति के सूचक नहीं. स्कूल जाते बच्चे, लहलहाते खेत, शाम चिड़ियों की चहचहाट में काम से लौटती औरतें, पार्क में दादियों का झुंड और किलकारियां करते बच्चे भी हो सकते हैं द्योतक क्रांति के. So most of the times we miss that progress and revolution is largely, this university is a revolution. You sitting here, we're discussing this as a revolution. These are what revolutions are made of. Revolutions are not merely taking out flags and going and creating anarchy on the streets, most of the times.
It's lovely, sir. Lovely poem juxtaposes two different images. One is a bloody image that Marx would like to see, dictatorship of the proletariat, and the other is a more sort of a egalitarian or a simplistic, maybe a rustic lifestyle where women are coming from work to their children. So it's lovely to see this poem, sir. Uh, One more thing I was interested to ask you. I was just watching your podcast with another interviewer. There you mentioned that in Bihar, if you go, the political sort of uh, they are very well aware of the politics around them. Not just around them, you would see people discussing Hamas and Israel and Russia and Ukraine on the streets, on the chai shops. Okay, but when they are so politically aware, what has gone wrong? Then why things are not working there? Why are they still choosing the leaders that they are choosing?
So the problem with twofold, I would say. One, because they do not have good options. So the only choice they are generally left with कि लालू को चुने कि नीतीश को चुने. तो फिर वो बोलता है कि लालू का तो देख लिया 15 साल, अब नहीं चुन सकते उसको वापस, तो फिर वो नीतीश को 20 साल से चुन रहे हैं. So the problem, and this is not just a Bihar problem, to be honest. This is a problem across India. People have to choose leaders because there's such dearth of good options that they have. And then you ask them to vote. You say, if you are a good citizen, you have to vote. So when they go out to vote, they'll vote for the lesser evil. They do not vote for the best. Understand this. So that's one problem. Now, that's another set of problem, and we can delve into why there are dearth of options, because politics is still not a career in India. Politics is still not a profession wherein families would want their kids to go and take up as a profession, right? When I decided to join politics, my parents have been extremely supportive, to be honest, but they were quite surprised, and my father was like, and he has been a part of Sangh and all throughout, and he has watched politics very closely, and he knows that people like me do not survive in politics. So he was like, "Tum kya karoge politics mein?" Right? And that's the first sense of skepticism that you get. Right? I somehow survived, but I still feel I would be a rare example of, rarest example. I see so many people who want to get into politics, but there are not enough avenues. There are not enough opportunities. The existing setup does not allow newer and better people to get in. And so that's another problem at all. Now, within the existing setup also, you may say, there are some good people who enter at times and present themselves as options. So why don't people elect them, right? There's also a problem, people would have to trust you that you have come into this for a long-term haul, right? Which is, so let's say what you see very often is a bureaucrat after the end of their careers, they say, ab to sab kuch ho gaya, to politics kar lete hain. So every bureaucrat then finally ends into politics, right, after their careers. But people read into that ab ye retire kar gaye to kuch kaam nahi bacha hai, to politics kar lete hain. So they do not take them seriously, most of them you would see. And most of the bureaucrats who finally enter into politics, you would see they do not succeed at it also. While they were so good in their careers, usi zile mein, they would have been the district collectors and SPs, and they would have been revered by everybody, respected. But when they come back as politicians, nobody gives them any damn to them, right? Then when some people enter, what happens is people would just come and say we'll change everything, and they'll be there for a year or two. When elections happen, even if they contest elections, they lose, they'll go back to some alternate careers. So people realize that you can't trust them. वो election जीत गया तब तो रह जाएगा, otherwise नहीं रहने वाला. So first you have to present yourself as a serious politician. You have to say, I win or lose electoral politics or social work, I have come to be here. I have come to be with you, amongst you, work with you. That confidence has to be built. Most of the politicians from the other side of spectrum who come into politics, people see them as opportunistic. Saying, ये आज आया है, कल चला जाएगा. ये पढ़ लिख के आ गया, ज़्यादा पढ़ लिख लिया, आया है, थोड़ा मजाक करेगा, घूम फिर के वापस ही जाना है. So that's the one part. Second, when you start building that trust, right? When you start building that trust, you would have to then break a lot of barriers. You would have to, and not just by words, by actions, you would have to show that you are beyond what the traditional politics is there. You're beyond the politics of caste, let's say. You're beyond the politics of whatever other divisions that there may be, right? Which also people do not trust initially. So, and hence what they do is, they generally resort to the easier options. So they say कि सब तो वैसे ही है, तो अपने जात वाले को ही वोट दे देते हैं. कम से कम जात के नाम पे कल को कभी कुछ जरूरत पड़ी तो मदद कर देगा. That's the basic logic they give to themselves when they are voting, right? And there's a quote which says कि लकड़हारा लकड़ी काटता रहा और लकड़ी कटती रही क्योंकि पेड़ कटती रही क्योंकि पेड़ को लगा कि जो कुल्हाड़ी में लगी हुई लकड़ी है वो तो मेरे ही जात की है, right? So that's another logic. And next what happens is also what we see is in an area where there's not a rule of law, what happens is generally for any problems people have to go to or resort to somebody who can solve their problems. So आज कोई पढ़ लिख के बहुत ज़्यादा करके IIT, IIM से आके भी if they are there in a village in Bihar, they'll not be able to solve their problems vis-a-vis a bahubali there who can just call up, वो थाने में कॉल कर सकता है, वो ब्लॉक ऑफिस में कॉल कर सकता है, उसका काम करवा सकता है, या कल को कहीं झगड़ा भी हुआ, कुछ प्रॉब्लम भी हुआ, he can get it sorted. So you cannot expect people to look beyond their immediate interests. That's not human. हम सब अपना अपना देखते हैं, तो वो भी अपना देखता है, उसको लगता है ये जो है मेरा बाहुबली जो है ये कम से कम उसको बोल देने से मेरा कुछ काम हो जाता है. And hence they pick up those people. So and hence it is a very long change. Again, what I'm saying is you have to present options, be there, keep working, keep sustaining, keep losing, yet be there, keep fighting the people. So there's a crowding out effect. So I don't know if any of you are from economics. So good money crowds out bad money crowds out good money, right? So when there are so many bad people, let's say very generalistically bad people, they generally crowd out any good person who wants to get in. But let's say tomorrow you are able to create a system where there are too many good people, then any bad person who starts coming, he'll get crowded out. So that's the fight, which is how many good people can you bring in to crowd out the bad people. That numbers has to be critical and enough.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because I myself have seen a lot of my friends who expect goodness and, you know, all sorts of honesty and good conduct from one set of leaders. And then they celebrate when their own the ones whom they support, who has done, you know, who has beaten up this guy, who has beaten up the reporter. So they will say it with a lot of pride that, see, this bhaiya today did this and this was right. So I think this, I am never able to understand this. Why do we expect all sorts of goodness from one person and the same person will say, oh, he did this, because I don't get the reason. But talking about caste, I had a lot of discussion here also with my colleagues, and mostly from the people coming from big cities are not able to understand or realize how severe the problem is in Bihar, especially. So I saw when you have also mentioned that incidents in your book when Parameshwar Mukhya, the leader of the Ranveer Sena, died. So I was there on the streets of Boring Road and I saw the mayhem that was caused on that day. So I would just like you to just tell our listeners something about how bad the situation was and what kinds of armies, caste armies, used to exist.
So just to extend your observation on caste. बोलते हैं कि अपनी जाति का क्रिमिनल दूसरी की जाति का क्रिमिनल होता है, या गुंडा क्रिमिनल जो भी होता है, लेकिन अपनी जाति का क्रिमिनल बाहुबली होता है. So that's a common principle, and that happens but I'll just differ from in a sense that caste is a problem only in Bihar or maybe more in Bihar. I would say caste is a problem everywhere. The manifestations of it differ. So there's extreme caste problem in Tamil Nadu as well. And while it does not manifest into massacres and wars, but you'll see such a deep-rooted division in the society based on that. And it's supposedly one of the most developed states, right? And I don't know how many of you follow the parliamentary proceedings, but in the recently concluded session, there was a very simplistic, resolution which was brought in, and it was just being passed out. that the parliamentary proceedings will be translated in a lot of other languages as well. And Sanskrit was also one of the languages in which you have to translate all the parliamentary proceedings so that everybody can read it. And there are almost 18-20 languages. And then this MP from Tamil Nadu, Dayanidhi Maran, right? And he rose up and said, why is our taxpayers' money being wasted on Sanskrit? Only 73,000 people in India speak Sanskrit. And, while the speaker then, shut him and saying, what's your problem with Sanskrit? But you understand, it's not just about him pointing out that taxpayers' money is being used and it is being wasted. If taxpayers' money wastage was really a metric, so many thousands of schemes and their own pensions and salaries would have been stopped first of the member of parliaments, right? But the problem is not that. The entire problem is with Sanskrit being a representation of Indian civilizational heritage, being one of the most, so all of Indian cultural or civilizational heritage that you see, the language in which it generally gets represented is Sanskrit. Even the southern languages have a Sanskrit influence, right? But still he opposes it because he's opposing that ideology itself. It's not just about the language. Understand this. And that also comes from caste and Dravidian politics. So the entire Dravidian politics is based on the fact that our entire history has been a history of oppression. And hence, let's forget it. So whatever history there's been before we got independence, that's not a history we want. So the manifestations of caste are very, very different in areas. In Bihar, what happened is, in Uttar Pradesh, there are a lot of caste. In Bihar, what happens is how politicians or politics uses this caste is how it manifests, right? So in Bihar, the existing government then, Lalu Prasad Yadav's government, what he realized is to create a vote bank, you have to create divisions. And the biggest fault line in a society like Bihar is a fault line along caste lines, right? So he created, so there was already a fault line. What he did was divide it, make the division slightly wider, and to consolidate his own, so as to say, castemen or his own group of castemen. What he said, let's make somebody a villain. And he said, whatever atrocities have happened till now, the upper castes are responsible for it, which is also true in many a sense. But what he said is, let's reverse this position. So he did not say, let's end this oppression. He said, abhi tak lathi uski thi, ab lathi hamari hai. Right? So he said, let's reverse it. And there are a lot of quotes that I've mentioned in the book. He said, ab kurte ke upar ganji pehenne ka samay aa gaya hai. Ya unke gharon se uchi ghare banao. So he created the divide and said, this is the time of that revenge or whatever has happened, right? And that led into, so the groups which were more aligned to him, they got even more emboldened, saying, now it is the power with us, we can do whatever we want. So they started asserting their power in every way. So a lot of these Naxalite groups, which had just come in Bihar, so a lot of Naxalite factions, and most importantly, the MCC, they carried out a massacre in Bara in 1992, in which almost 34 people from the upper caste, they were, these people surrounded the entire village at night, right? And they were dressed in police uniforms. And then they went knocking the doors of each of these people or houses. And they said, we have come to look for a person called Ramadhar Singh, who was again, a Bhumihar strongman and somebody who was convicted of, massacres in a nearby village. And we will not harm you. We are just looking for that person. Give us that man and we will not harm you. But, and people opened their doors and then they collected all the male members of the house from across the village. They paraded them to a nearby canal and they asked them their castes, and they let go some of the people who were not from the caste that they wanted. So there were 2 or 3 Dalits, they let them go. In fact, there's a very slight difference between a caste called Bhumihars and Brahmins. Slight difference, kind of kindred caste. But they let the Brahmins go. They said, no, we only want the Bhumihars. And they make them lie on the banks of that canal, 35 of them, and they slit their throats. Right? And this is how it had come to, because the divisions were so great. Now, when this came, the Bhumiyas also formed their army. They said, we have no resolve. We do not have a way but to form our own army. The Rajputs formed their own armies. The Kurmis formed their own armies. Everybody formed their own armies. They said the state is not going to support us. The police is not going to come. Even if the police is informed, they'll not come at night. Everybody knew. They'll only come in the mornings. So we need to have arms. We need to have our own armies. We need to guard our own villages. So there were armies and guns, and the villages would just protect their own villages. The police was non-existent. The state was non-existent. And that is what happens when you make the state so weak. If it is not able to protect the rights of the people, people resort to such ways. And it keeps on, this is a vicious cycle then. It keeps on getting worse and worse and worse.
All of those who have lived in those times must have someone whom they have lost from their own families. I, for myself, have lost my maternal granduncle who was coming from a marriage and function, and then he was murdered in between. But this is some crime happening. But what is the attitude of the state? You mentioned that in your book that a similar incidents where 36 people were murdered brutally. And then Rabari Devi, when she was the chief minister, when she was asked about this, that you should condemn this incidents, then she says, कि वो अपना वोटर थोड़े है इस तरह से. So what would you say to this kind of political apathy of the state?
So the entire origin of this is the politics and the government itself. See, again, caste is not just a Bihar phenomena, right? So you will also have to appreciate this, that why did such massacres and such a level of catastrophe happen only in Bihar? There were Bahubalis in Uttar Pradesh as well. Uttar Pradesh was even as, let's say, in bad news for its kind of crimes and, Bahubalis and so on. But this kind of massacres never have happened in Uttar Pradesh. So what's the difference? The difference was only the government. If a government starts, in such cases, as you said, starts taking sides, if a government starts taking very clearly, starts promoting, and I've quoted this in my book, there are a lot of numbers to this, wherein Lalu Prasad Yadav, what he did was essentially, he created a vote bank of his own caste, which is the Yadavs and the Muslims. And he said these together constitute almost 30% of the population. And then a couple of more castes combined together, they have a very formidable electoral kind of combination. Nobody's going to defeat them. So they don't need the support of other castes.
Today, we can't imagine what Nalanda was. Like, we can imagine and we hear about it. What has gone so drastically wrong that today this sad condition of Bihar is? And so many intellectuals, so many IAS, you see, so many startups, all people going out of that brain drain can be one. But what has happened that has led to such a big downfall of Bihar, as we can see? Lalu is a recent phenomenon. But what about 200 years back? And it's one of the most fertile regions in Bihar, is one of the most. So what do you think is the reason?
Yeah, that's a nice question. So, and I quote this in the book, which is, I for all the readings that I've done, all the knowledge I've accumulated, I've tried to crystallize all of this into three reasons which has led to Bihar where it is today. And I've quoted Lalu's reign as the last and the most recent reason. But two other reasons that I've quoted is one, during the British's rule, the land revenue system that Bihar was subjected to was permanent settlement, right? And permanent, so if you remember some bit of history classes, the Britishers imposed three kind of land revenue systems in different parts of the country. Permanent settlement, Raiyatwari and Mahalwari, right? So Raiyatwari was generally imposed in the southern states, right? And the difference between permanent settlement and Raiyatwari is, in Raiyatwari, the land revenue was linked to the productivity, right? So there was an incentive to increase the land productivity. And hence, a lot of investment happened in land productivity. and even associated sectors like human capital, which is health, education, because they realize to increase the productivity of the land, you will also have to invest in human capital, right? But in permanent settlement, the land revenue was fixed. So the Britishers did not have any incentive, उनको उतना ही मिलना था. So they did not have any incentive to invest in land productivity or human capital productivity. So this is a system which existed till the Britishers went out of this country. And this created a lot of difference in terms of investments in the southern states and northern states, if you see, right? A second reason which I see very important, which is very less talked about, but which is very important, and I keep stressing upon it, is a policy that the first Nehru government brought in, which is called the freight equalization policy. So if you remember, our first 5-year plans was basically focused on creating heavy industries. We said the private sector does not have enough capacity, so the government will create heavy industries. And all of these heavy industries that you see in the country today were mostly created in the first 5-year plans, first and second 5-year plans. And to facilitate that industrialization, what the government said, that the minerals would be available at the same price throughout the country, irrespective of where it is mined. So a coal which is mined in Jharkhand would be available in Tamil Nadu at the same price, right? Or an iron ore which is mined in Jamshedpur will be available in Gujarat at the same price, and the government would subsidize the transportation. So now the industrialists did not have any incentive to create industries in the mineral rich regions of Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, West Bengal. They said, let's put up these industries closer to the ports because the movement will be easier. So hence a lot of industrialization happened in the nearby port regions, which is today's Chennai or Maharashtra or Gujarat. A lot of industries were set up in this belt. And this policy continued till 1993 when it was finally scrapped. And what happens is there's always a cascading or a multiplier effect in these kind of industries, which is if there's a Maruti factory in Manesar, all of you know there's a Maruti factory, right? So even if a newer ancillary factories are to come up, they'll come closer to that Maruti factory itself. Somebody will not go and create a small motor parts factory somewhere in Bihar and supply it to Manesar. They'll create close to it only. So once a location starts getting industrialized, there's again cycle. Other industry will start coming closer to it because it has the resources, the water, the manpower, the skills, everything, electricity, everything. And by 1993, when it was scrapped, this policy, these states had already become extremely industrialized. And these states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, which actually held most of the minerals of the country, and Jharkhand was a part of Bihar, was just devoid of any kind of industries. They just have very primary mineral processing industries, which is iron ore to steel. So Jamshedpur, there's a lot of iron ore to steel which is made. But the steel then goes to Chennai because the cars are made in Chennai. Right? So that's another big reason. So I think these three are the major reasons.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mrityunjay ji. This has been a very enriching session, especially I think those of us from outside of Bihar, it's a Bihar 101. So thanks for that. So my question is about an issue which is a pan-India issue, but something that we observe more in Bihar, which is this obsession with the public sector, with government jobs, right? And there is all sorts of glorification also that happens again at a pan-India level. Movies are made, web series, etc. Now, I'm sure that has some reasons, like you mentioned, the lack of maybe private sector industrialization. But, as somebody who's in politics, in your interactions with the people in Bihar and the region in general, how problematic has this mindset been? Because that is also feeding into, lack of industrialization, right? It seems to be like a chicken and egg problem now, because there are people more interested in government jobs, less interest in the private sector. Perhaps that is also leading to a lack of innovation, lack of entrepreneurship, right? So no matter what the origins of this problem are, it is clearly having a negative impact. So have you sort of had any sort of experiences where you were able to convince people out of this mindset, or maybe challenge this mindset? Because it is a national issue now, right? We want to break out of this at the national level as well. and India's success is closely linked to Bihar's success. So I just wanted to get your perspective on this particular obsession that we see.
No, so that's a very, I think, representative of, as you said, rightly said, the lack of opportunities in the private sector, right? And this, in fact, for researchers, I would say, if you have to, across India, if you have to say and create a proper correlation with certain identifiers as to what identifies if a certain region is backward and a certain region is developed, the dependence on the reliance of government jobs is the clearest, I would say, indicator. The more underdeveloped a certain region, the more reliance on government jobs in that region, right? So today nobody wants to be, or very rarely does somebody want a government job in Tamil Nadu or a Gujarat. They don't care, right? In Bombay, if you go, I have lived in Bombay for 4 years. I worked with Asian Paints and corporates. People don't even know what's the full form of IAS. A lot of these people, right? They don't even care, right? To be honest, it may be a very good thing, but they don't care, right? In Bihar, what happens again? But the other problem also, what happens is, as I said, there's a lot of problem in the law and order, right? And if there is even slight deviations in the rule of law, and there's a slight dependence on discretion, which is what happens in a society devoid of law. When the law becomes less, discretion becomes more. So let's say an administrator in the US of a similar rank of, let's say, a district collector cannot take decisions as he wants. There are so many rules and procedures to be followed that he's scared to take any discretionary kind of a decision. He'll follow rules to the T, right? And hence he cannot draw, he does not draw so much of power. But, and similarly, even if in India you see, in Bihar what happens, or states which are slightly low on the law and order side, I would say, what happens is, since the law and order is a problem, these people draw a lot from discretion. District collector को मन किया तो उसने कोई एक ऐसी पास कर दिया, मतलब कोई पूछने वाला नहीं है, so as to say. SP को मन किया तो 4 आदमी को उठा लिया ऐसी, लाके जेल में रख दिया, 10 दिन तक जेल में ही रखे हुए. Now people see this as power. से यार उसको तो जो मन में आता है कर देता है, वो district collector को district का राजा बोलते हैं वहाँ पे. So they see because him behaving in that way, and then they see and say, so they think that this is really such a powerful post to be aspired for. That's a completely wrong, I would say, motivation to get in. And in fact, half of the civil service aspirants that you go and speak to in Rajendra Nagar today, and you ask them, why do you want to get into the services? More than half of the people would speak on similar lines. And this is a very personal experience that I'm telling you. Half of these people would say, "Arey, bahut power hai usme." And they do not know what to do with that power. That is what is drawing them into the services. And then it becomes a vicious cycle. When they go into the services, they go for such wrong reasons that when they're there, they exercise that power in the most brutal ways. Right? But again, having said that, it's not a chicken and egg problem, I would say. If the state starts creating such opportunities, people do not have as many options, to be honest. There are so many people. People will start gravitating towards these private sector options. And then there will be a continuous cycle of more private sector coming in, more people employed by it. And when people start saying, oh, acha, private sector mein bhi itne paise milte hain. Right now, half of these aspirants in Bihar, they do not even know what private sector salaries could be like. They're not even aware, to be honest, because they have not gone to such good colleges or such good pedigrees. So they think whatever the government pays is the best that can be paid. When they start realizing that a normal person who does coding can get paid 5 lakhs a month, they'll start coding from the second day. Right? So I think a state has a lot of role to play in this. Yeah.
Namaste, sir. My name is Vishal, and I think one of the biggest problem that Bihar is facing now, from what I say, a decades or what, migration, and especially the labor class migration. And what's your take on this? They feel a lot of criticisms and humiliation, the labor class migrants in other states. Do you think, and what's your take on this? After getting a huge number a huge amount in this budget also. Will they be able to cope up with this problem in coming years, or what is the biggest reason and cause, like which is pulling them back in dealing with this problem? Thank you.
So I think again a problem of opportunities there. There are so little opportunities in Bihar. You see, you speak to people in Delhi and these bigger cities, and see, migration is not the problem in itself. Understand this. Interstate migration happens a lot in the country. So somebody from Delhi may be working in Mumbai as well, right? But what they're working in is a very value-added job, right? What they would be working is would be paying them, let's say, 1 lakh, 2 lakh rupees per month, or something that in. Let's say if you have to financial services in India, generally you would gravitate to Mumbai, wherever you are living in. If you have to work in the startup segment in India, you would generally gravitate to Bangalore. Wherever you come from, you may come from the most affluent families or the most affluent cities. So migration in itself is not a problem, understand this. But what you are migrating for is a problem. So let's say if you are migrating for a simple graduation course, that's a problem. That your state does not have simple graduation colleges where you would want to study. So today, if somebody has to, do engineering in Bihar, right? So there's a recently opened IT a couple of years ago. There was an NIT again a couple of years ago, but you do not have any other good engineering colleges there. So that's a problem. Now, if you have to migrate to do a job of a security guard in Delhi, that's a problem. So because you are migrating to take up a job which pays you 12,000 rupees, 13,000 rupees, which you then stay there with 10 other people in a small room. You cook your own food, you work hard, you still save 3,000, 4,000 rupees, you send it home. And this is your lifestyle. You go back to your home once a year in crowded trains where stampede happens when you try to board it. And then you come back and you spend your whole life in this. Your family's back there in the village. You are earning 12, 13,000 rupees doing the job of security guard, which is not something for which you should have come to Delhi or Mumbai to. This is something, 10, 12,000 opportunities should be available to everybody within their own districts, in fact. It's such a small thing, right? So that's the problem. And that again is what I'm saying is the problem of opportunities of the state. It has not been able to create those basic opportunities. That's the problem. And people treating them in a certain way does not change that, because they have come for their livelihoods. So they would just accept every behavior that is thrown at them. I remember very clearly coming to, and I've quoted this in my book, I came to first Delhi in 2004. I just completed my 12th and I wanted to prepare for my JEE examinations too. So I took admission in FITG. There's the FITG main center used to be in Kalusarai, just near IIT Delhi. So I took admissions there. And I used to stay in Katwaria Sarai, if you know Delhi. It's in Hoj Khas. So we used to board buses, and the bus drivers and conductors, TTC bus drivers and conductors, anybody would do anything and they would just, Bihari used to be a cuss word then. So they would just say, "Hey, Bihari hai kya?" So anybody would cross the road and say, achanak say, "Hey, Bihari hai kya?" Right? So, and we used to find this so common. Right? We used to think everybody is, Bihari bol diya to, like, and it is, मुझे लगता है अब थोड़ा कम हो गया है शायद, या उस सेगमेंट में अभी भी है, अब उस सेगमेंट में हम नहीं जाते हैं. But within that segment, because they have come for their livelihood, so they accept all the abuses or whatever is hurled at them, because they do not have an option. Nobody wants to live so far away from their homes and being treated in a certain way and still be there. If they had options, they would not be there. Yeah.
नमस्ते सर. मैं खुद नालंदा से हूँ, तो एक पॉलिटिकल क्वेश्चन होगा मेरा. नालंदा का जो पूरा रीजन है वो पूरा मगध रीजन है. मगध रीजन में सबसे ज़्यादा नालंदा ने IAS दिए हैं, और मगध रीजन के अंदर एक गांव है जहाँ पे सिर्फ IIT नहीं दिए हैं लोगों ने. अगर वहाँ पे कोई बच्चा JEE मेंस लिख रहा है तो इट मीन्स वो NIT नहीं आएगा, वो IIT ही जाएगा. तो वहाँ से लोग इंजीनियरिंग और IIM कंप्लीट करके US और UK में हैं अभी प्रेजेंट में. क्योंकि जब बात आती है वोट करने की, तो वो कैंडिडेट क्यों नहीं देखते, वो पर्टिकुलर कास्ट वो क्यों कर रहे हैं पढ़े लिखे होने के बाद भी. ये एक इस पे आपके क्या कहना है?
नहीं, कैंडिडेट ऐसे बहुत ऑप्शंस तो नहीं मिलते हैं, टू बी ऑनेस्ट। ऑप्शंस वही रहते हैं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है कि हो सकता है कैंडिडेट दूसरे से थोड़ा बेहतर हो, लेकिन बहुत ज्यादा ऐसा नहीं है कि एकदम ही कोई बहुत पढ़ा लिखा बहुत काबिल जनरली कैंडिडेट्स मिलते हैं। और मिलते भी हैं तो मैंने जैसा पहले कहा ना, वो ज्यादातर क्या होता है कि वो जो कैंडिडेट्स होते हैं वो ज्यादातर नॉन सीरियस होते हैं, वो शौकिया होते हैं। एक शौकिया पॉलिटिशियन बोलते हैं कि अभी उसने बहुत पैसा वैसा कमा लिया या उसका करियर हो गया, तो उसने बोला अब एक आध साल चल के पॉलिटिक्स करके देखते हैं। एंड what draws them to politics is the glamour of politics, but they do not understand that 99% of politics is extremely hard work. It's so grilling. In fact, I criticize politicians, but I also say the politicians are the hardest working people on the planet. एक दिन आप अगर politician का देख लोगे ना closely, anybody who's a career politician, आप सुबह से शाम तक रात तक रह जाओ उसके साथ, हालत खराब हो जाएगी। इतनी टफ लाइफ होती है for the kind of people, number of people they have to speak to, the kind of engagements they have to go to, the kinds of things they have to get into, the kind of requests they get. So it's very tough, and hence when they come, they understand that politics is not something for them, right? And they go back, and the people see this very often. So hence, कभी भी बाहर से कोई आता है ना, तो उनको पहले ही से skepticism होता है कि ये आया है शौक से चला जाएगा. And hence they do not vote for them, for non-serious candidates. They want to vote for somebody जिसके ऊपर विश्वास हो कि ये मेरे साथ यहीं पे रहेगा, कुछ भी होगा मेरे साथ तो ये मेरे साथ खड़ा रहेगा, वो कॉन्फिडेंस आना चाहिए उसको. Yeah.
We'll take one final question. All the rest can be taken up debate.
सर मेरा एक सवाल था कि जैसे अभी तक हम लोग दो पार्टी के बारे में सुनते थे, जैसे नीतीश कुमार हो गए, लालू यादव हो गए, अब एक जन स्वराज पार्टी के बारे में सुना जा रहा है जो प्रशांत किशोर जी की है, तो क्या परिवर्तन की इच्छा रखना सही है उनसे?
अगेन जब आप विपक्ष में होते हैं ना, जैसे मैंने कहा, तो उनकी बातें अच्छी लगती है सबकी, तो असली परीक्षा विपक्ष में रह के नहीं दी जा सकती है. आप वो जो अभी बोल रहे हैं उसको फेस वैल्यू पे लेंगे तो अच्छा ही लगेगा सब कुछ, उसमें कुछ बुरा नहीं कहा उन्होंने. जो मेहनत भी करे कोई बुराई नहीं है, घूम रहे कोई बुराई नहीं है, शिक्षा की बात करें कोई बुराई नहीं है, तो क्रिटिसाइज करने का ऑनेस्टली कुछ नहीं है उसमें. और बहुत अच्छी चीज है, इनिशिएटिव है. कोई भी राजनीति में आता है तो उसका स्वागत ही करना चाहिए, कहीं से भी आए, कम से कम आया तो सोचा तो. बट अगेन मेरा जो टेस्टिंग पॉइंट है वो वही है, what somebody does when they come into power is very very important. So unless you see somebody in power, you cannot judge their true character. बोलना बहुत आसान है और विपक्ष में रह के क्रिटिसाइज करना भी बहुत आसान होता है, बट when you go to govern, जब आप रूल करने जाते हैं ना, तो इतने सारे आपके पास कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी चूज करने को होती हैं चीजें, और इतनी चीजें बैलेंस करने की होती हैं, तब बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है कि आप किस ऑप्शन को पिक कर रहे हैं.